Welcome to, what's this, the fourth one?
Oh, no, probably 6 or 7.
But a continuing lecture series by Charlie on art crime. This one is really interesting, strange, but also interesting, and he can tell you the whole story about what's happening. Give it to Charlie. Charlie's out.
Thanks for coming. Imagine you were this lovely lady right here, and you're nice and comfortable leaning against the wall, and some conceited middle-aged man and his wife, the guy's fully full of himself, come in, grab you, run to a rust-colored car and flee with you. And that's exactly what kind of happened. This painting is Woman Ochre, done by Willem de Kooning in 1955. Willem de Kooning, seen with his wife Elaine in this 1952 photo, was an abstract expressionist of the New York school. Abstract expressionism was a homegrown American art movement. New York school abstract expressionism was developed in 1940s and 50s. It was the first unique American homegrown movement. Its artists and critics rejected representational rendering and stressed spontaneous subconscious creation. So de Kooning was born on April 24th, 1904, the same birthday as my mama. And he was born in the Netherlands, Rotterdam. He came over on a ship as a stowaway. He ended up living in Hoboken, working as a house painter. He made friends with some Dutch immigrants that were there. There were Italians, Dutch, Irish in Hoboken at the time. He moved up to Manhattan and worked at odd jobs as painter, carpenter. He also started painting artistically. He became friends with two great artists, Arshil Gorky and Stuart Davis. In 1935, he joined the WPA, the workers' project that was created during the Depression to give people work when there was no jobs. And he worked for the Federal Art Project and did murals, which is very interesting. So he had a very interesting early life. During the 40s and 50s, he became part of a really dynamic group of friends of the New York school, such as Jackson Pollock, seen here doing his drip paintings, probably the most famous abstract expressionist, one of my favorites of that school. Mark Rothko standing in front of his very hypnotic paintings. You get mesmerized standing in front of a Rothko. And here's Arshil Gorky, who was a Turkish immigrant and ended up being one of his best friends. He was a very major influence. So here is an example of de Kooning's work. This is from 1955, the same year as Woman Ochre that was stolen from the museum, but different because here you see abstract expressionism. It's called composition in the hand. This one is in the Guggenheim in New York. He went against the grain and social norms of abstract expressionism with these woman series because you can see a woman in them. There's some representation. These were very important works in the artist's oeuvre, and they're highly sought after. This one's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Met in New York. And this one's in the Whitney Museum in New York. So you can go view these. I suggest you do. I often in these lectures talk about local paintings from like a 4-hour radius so you can see them: Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Washington. We have a lot at our fingertips, and we're lucky in this region. But back to Woman Ochre here. This was painted in 1955. It was donated by a collector to the University Arizona Museum of Art in the 1860s, where it was considered a gem of their collection. Here's the University of Arizona Art Museum. It's a small but significant collection. They house about 6,000 works of art. And to make a reference point, the beautiful Montclair Museum we have right here is considered small. That has 12,000 works of art. So this has about half as many works of art. The Princeton Museum, also considered small, that is ours and one of our best in the state. It has 117,000 works of art. The Philadelphia Museum, if you go to the Met constantly or you go to the LA Getty Museum, they consider that small, but it's really not. It has 240,000 works of art. Met Museum is gargantuan, has 1.5 million. So this is a small museum with a significant collection. The painting hung in this museum for many years until it was stolen on November 1985, the day after Thanksgiving. It was a very Black Friday for them indeed. A couple showed up before opening hours. A man with a cheesy mustache, they really believe afterwards that it was false, with a long trench coat. A woman with a long red coat. They were sitting on a concrete bench before opening hours. About 10-15 minutes, one of the employees walked in, one of the curators, saw them sitting on the bench. As to not leave them sitting on concrete, he let them in 10 minutes early, which was a bad mistake. The woman went and distracted a guard by talking about a painting. He ran up the stairs, pulled out a razor, cut out the painting, rolled it up, put it under his coat. They ran out, jumped into what was described as a rust-colored car, and they fled. There was nothing of evidentiary value, no surveillance footage, no cameras in the place, no registration from the plate's auto was taken. This couple were gone. The painting and the couple were completely in the wind, not a trace. The composite sketches were done by FBI artists. The university had its own police department, so it was jurisdiction, but the FBI has specialized agents, so they showed up to assist with this. Right now, today they have a unit that's art theft investigations team. Back then they didn't, but they always had experts in art theft investigations, so they showed up to assist. They have a number of resources and tools in their toolbox. One of their major tools in their toolbox today is the theft of major artwork statute US 18 US 668. This tool they use now, but it wasn't enacted at the time of this theft. It was enacted in 1994, 4 years after the Gardner heist in Boston, which I gave a lecture on about. They decided they had to make a federal law with a statute of limitations that would help them fight these crimes. But any major theft that might entail organized crime or interstate travel or a few other situations would bring the FBI into it, and there might be prosecutions that come about from it. So the statute is interesting, 18 US 668, because it says that any painting that is 100 years old and exceeds $5,000, or any painting regardless of its age, but is worth over $100,000, and or possession. If you knowingly possess and conceal a painting that was stolen that fits that criteria, then you can get up to 10 years in the Fed. And knowingly is the element to the crime. It's the key to this. So the statute of limitations in Boston, when they stole $500 million of artwork, the statute of limitations expired 7 years after the theft in Massachusetts. Now they made this, the statute of limitations ends 20 years after the theft. So 30 years later, the thief will be in the clear. Really 20 years one day, they're in the clear. But if you possess it, the clock ticks the minute they realize you possess it. So knowingly. So if you knowingly possess. Just a few notes on these sketches. I went to the FBI facial recognition classes for composites and reconstruction. This was our group. They were awesome. That's when I was a under cop, when I was on the job. And the FBI and the NYPD were the best at this. It's really interesting how they do these composites. And the FBI is very generous. We trained in Quantico at their facility for weeks. They pay the departments to send you for free. They pay cops from all over the US and Canada. We had a county mountie in this class. It was a very interesting group. They pay for them, they give them lodging, they give them food, and they want the premises to train all these cops and send the cop artists and send them back to their areas so they're available to all the departments when they needed them. This process involves a cognitive interview, and they develop these manuals where they show the victim all these facial features, different composites, many different noses, many different eyes, many different head shapes. So it's easier if you think about it. If you look at a photo and say, that looks just like that movie star, that looks just like my cousin Joe Schmuckatelli. If you try to say, well, what does Joe look like? And you can't really describe to someone, but you can show it looks just like this guy in the photo. So that process really worked. These FBI agents were really great at this, and that's why they got those good photos. Here's Karen Taylor. She was the best in the business. I got to train with her there at the FBI Academy. She taught their classes. I also trained with her in Oklahoma City. She wasn't FBI. She was from Texas and worked for their agencies These images aren't supposed to, and you look at our suspects in the Woman Ochre, they're not supposed to be an exact likeness. They usually never can be. They're not supposed to be a photograph. They're supposed to be in the ballpark that kind of looks like them. And when they put this in the paper, the hope is that with the story, you say, that looks like Joe Schmuckatelli, but he has that car and he acts like that, right? So, not supposed to be an exact, but look at Karen's work. She really nailed this guy. It's almost like she took a photo of him. She was the best. Some actually nail these people. And it's pretty kind of spooky how good, but the thing is, they're great artists, they're good at the interview, they're good at this, and they can make the person relax, they can help them recall memory, but they also have a good witness. If they have a good witness or victim who actually works with them and can recall, usually they see this part of the face and they just see angry eyes. It's like, who look like? He looked angry. I want you to look again at these. They were really well done. And then I want to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Jerry and Rita Alter. Now, they certainly look like the culprits in the sketches. Back when it was stolen in 1985, it was valued at $400,000. It would have fit the statute that I was talking about, and did after it was enacted in 1994 just because of possession, right, and concealing, if they have knowingly did that with the element. But today it's worth, in 2026, it's estimated at 160 million, give or take. 160 million. It's de Kooning, and it's one of us. It's a very important part of the series. De Kooning, it's interesting because he was an abstract expressionist, but he didn't have a problem going in and out, getting a little representational, where there were critics who would hammer you because now you're doing representational. And granted, it's still abstract, but you can see something in this. But he did his thing. He was a free artist. The authorities really believed they would get that painting back, and they really believed it would happen when it usually does when they try to move and sell it, or try to sell it. That's where they slip up. It's easy for good burglars and robbers to steal things. It's hard for them to sell a painting. It's one of the hardest things for them to fence. It's almost like when they thought they'd get them with like an undercover sting, or they hear someone's trying to sell it. It's almost like Munch's Scream that was stolen from the National Gallery in Oslo, Norway in 1995. Scotland Yard offered assistance with this and sent someone from the Metropolitan Police in London, an undercover man named Charlie Hill, very capable undercover officer. I knew him. He was a very interesting man. One of his parents was American, and from California, so he could mimic the American accent really well and act like us and talk like us. And the Getty Museum, he posed as a dirty American curator from the Getty in Los Angeles. The museum was totally on board. They faked his credentials, they faked his identity, and he managed to infiltrate that gang as a potential buyer, and offered to buy the Scream, and the bad guys were arrested and the artwork was recovered. So that's where they thought they would get this back. Good thieves know how to sell that piece, but they have difficulty selling it back. But once they start trying to sell it, they're getting vulnerable. This de Kooning was never seen again. No one ever tried to traffic it. No one ever tried to sell it on the black market. The case was closed in 1987 due to lack of leads. Not that they didn't want to pursue leads, they didn't have any to pursue. They wanted to recover it, so it was closed, but they would pursue leads if they came in. But this was totally in the wind. So it was totally in the wind until Rita Alter died. Jerry died in 2017 at age 81. She died later. These two hung this painting in their bedroom in that cheap $5 frame seen here for over 30 years. Their nephew, Ron Goldman, who is a squeaky clean little school teacher, innocent, he had no idea what the things were worth inside their house. He sold most of these belongings, including this, to Manzanita Ridge Antiques in Silver Springs, New Mexico. He thought it was ugly and worthless, this painting. This is the owners of Manzanita Ridge. They thought it was a knockoff copy until a customer came in and wanted to buy it, and the customer eventually informed them, I think you have an authentic de Kooning. 5 minutes of Google search, they found the painting, they found the museum, the story, they realized they had an authentic de Kooning stolen from a museum. They called the museum. The museum was overjoyed, but they moved cautiously. They stalled because the authorities wanted to move cautiously. So it had been missing for over 3 decades. Eventually, it ended up home. Rita and Jerry were retired New York school teachers. He taught music and played the sax. Rita had a degree in education, got a master's in pathology. As a New York City school teacher, he thought he was a genius. He was full of himself. He really thought he was all that. He never received the promotions he thought he deserved, so he got mad. He retired after 35 years of teaching at age 48 early. They wanted to escape the rat race, so they moved to Cliff, New Mexico, which at the time had about 300 people in it. Rita went to work as a speech teacher. He gave music lessons. They escaped the rat race, but didn't have a lot of income. They had meager incomes to live on. This is their home. But even though they had meager incomes, they had a home with 20 acres and a built-in pool. This is a long way from New York. You can see their home right there. This is where they hung the painting. Behind the door in their bedroom in the cheap $5 frame. Jerry used a big ugly screw, a bolt. He put it into the baseboard to keep the door knob from going into the painting. They had a black curtain, a blackout curtain to keep it from fading. So he knew the strong sun would hurt it. They appear to have liked de Kooning's work because they found in the house a lot of cheap prints that he had in there. Maybe they actually, when they lived in New York, it's possible they attended galleries and saw his works. It's also possible they met de Kooning in those galleries or at like the Cedar Tavern or the bars in the neighborhood that they lived. The Cedar Tavern was the famous hangout of the abstract expressionists. But just a quick recap of these two. They retired early, they fled the rat race to New Mexico, they lived on meager pensions and small incomes. He was a music teacher who played the sax, thought he was God's gift to the world. He was a narcissist, he felt slighted by the system and the world for not receiving the respect and success he believed he should have received because he thought he was a genius. He stated in a book that he wrote that he wanted to exact revenge on the world for not respecting my genius. This is who we're dealing with. And maybe the stolen painting was symbolic of that revenge. He could look at it daily and feel his vindictive desire satiated. But again, he died at 81. His wife passed of a stroke after her husband. They left 2 children behind. They weren't children at the time. They were adults now, a son and a daughter. He also was a wannabe painter, and he was horrible. He was this terrible painter. His paintings were all over the house. They're ugly. He believed he could make it big as a painter and a writer. He thought he was going to be like de Kooning in these big galleries, and again, they're disrespecting me. He thought he was going to be a bestseller author. He's a terrible author. But oddly enough, on meager salaries, they traveled to 140 countries and 5 continents. They traveled at least 3 times a year to 140 countries on 5 continents. They had a built-in pool, a house full of items, and they left $1 million in their account when they died. And the composites that were drawn looked like the authors, and the woman suspect had on a red coat. Look at this photo from 1985, Rita in a red coat. They had a red Toyota Supra. It's not rust-colored, but it's red, and here's photos of them with their red car in 1985. They were in Tucson for Thanksgiving in 1985, the day before the heist in Thanksgiving, the robbery, the theft in Thanksgiving. This is Ron Goldman, their executor, when he was younger. He ended up becoming a school teacher because he wanted to follow in his uncle's footsteps because he thought his uncle was the greatest guy on earth, the smartest man in the world. He's adventurous, you know. So they were very close. I'm re-emphasizing some of these details of these 2 suspects. Due to their death and the painting's recovery, they only remain suspects. It cannot be proven that they stole the painting. They can't even be proven that they knowingly possessed it. Nothing can be proven at this point. But the obvious is kind of hard to ignore. They took their secrets to their grave, kind of. They kind of took their secrets to the grave because Jerry wrote a book called The Cup and the Lip. And the cup and the lip, the cup in Yiddish is, the cup is your brain and the lip is your mouth, and what comes out of your mouth from the brain, that's what you decide. You decide what you tell people. You can buy this book. I did. I couldn't resist. It's a horrible read, but in it there appears to be these descriptions, or if you will, confessions of this crime. He described many short stories in this book as being true-to-life fiction. They were his life stories. He told Ron Goldman, his nephew, these are my stories, but with a little fiction, you know, true-to-life fictions. He wrote in the preface that I worked to maintain a connection with reality in varying degrees. Most of the tales are derived from my personal experiences and or historical record, and therein lies their credibility. There is a chapter in this called Thrill Seekers that describes a couple who was stealing a painting from a major French, it looks like it was the Louvre in his mind, but it was this major French museum. So thrill seekers, couple stealing a painting. They appeared to live boring lives, but were adventure seekers and would risk all to find those thrills. So the character in this particular chapter about the thrill seekers stealing a painting, he wrote, at home, George and Susie lived a rather conservative life. They look like they're right out of the sitcom I Leave It to Beaver, right? They live a conservative life, but they had a double life. They lived a double life. Highly inquisitive by nature, both were thrill seekers of a double variety. Rather than seeking stimulation from activities such as skydiving, hang gliding, or Russian roulette, they satisfied their psychological need by jeopardizing their freedom in a succession of larcenies. He's just telling us he's doing these larcenies to succeed, to fill this need. They saw themselves as masters of victimless crimes, which I disagree. We're all victims of cultural crimes, but this is how, unfortunately, people do see them. He wrote, this was not their first undertaking, but it was their most ambitious by far. So he's telling us they did it before. In another chapter in his book, and these are the photos he actually took. In another chapter in his book, there was a jewel theft from an art museum that is committed by an elderly woman and her granddaughter. So he's describing two different thefts from two different museums here. These two stole a huge emerald called the Eye of a Jaguar, and he described them as having a couch with a button that opened a wall, a fake wall, where they hid the eye of the jaguar, which he wrote, 2 pair of eyes exclusively are there to see, much like the de Kooning in their bedroom. So you would think this book would help you get into the mind of, create a profile of an art thief, but you cannot create a profile of an art thief. Like most other crimes, usually these thefts are mercenary in nature. The criminal sees an opportunity to steal something worth money that they want to fence, and the only problem is that selling stolen art is difficult. It's not as easy as other items, like you can chop down a car, you can melt gold, you can bust up jewels and sell them. So art is harder to move, especially a well-known artist's works. Rarely do you find a case where the criminal is stealing the work for aesthetic reasons or love of art or for their own collection. This case of the altars was rare. But obviously they must have did something to gather all that money, so maybe they stole some things and sold it, we just don't know. There is a much more notorious case where a very successful art thief named Stefan Brettweiser, seen here, stole over 230 pieces from 172 museums in Europe just to build a personal collection for his own enjoyment. He committed these numerous art thefts from 1995 to 2001 with his girlfriend. They'd walk in, she'd distract the guards, and he'd steal. The only thing is he targeted even much smaller museums usually because they're easier. They have less security, less money to spend on security. But mind you, the art thief's only successful if they don't get caught, right? And the altars never got caught. They didn't even become suspects. But so they were successful. They accomplished what they wanted to do. Stefan got caught twice. In the case of the Gardner works from the Boston Museum, a lot of people say they weren't successful. They stole things that could never be sold. But we don't know they were never moved or sold or what they got for them. We never know where they ended up. There's no proof of that. Brettweiser's lawyer tried to defend him for all these thefts with an argument that he suffered from a rare ailment that, although is widely believed to exist, like 100 people every so many years go to hospitals in Florence for this, it's not medically accepted as real. So it's called the Stendhal syndrome. This is where a person stands in front of an artwork, is so overtaken by its beauty, they get dizzy, they lose their breath, their heart beats, and they faint, and they lose all control of themselves. He lost all control of himself, and he had to steal it because he had the Stendhal syndrome. This is first named after, this was his real defense. They didn't have any other way to defend this guy. This was first called the Florence syndrome, and after the French writer Stendhal in the 1700s had an attack while visiting. He wrote a book, Naples and Florence, and he had an attack visiting museums in Florence. He got overtaken by the Renaissance works. So syndrome or no syndrome, Stefan got up to 26 months in prison. His girlfriend, who was the accomplice, did 6 months. His mother got 18 months because when the police were closing in on him, she panicked and wanted to protect her little baby, and she starts taking all the works and cutting them up and burning them and burning the wood panels and throwing items in the canal. European countries, though, are notoriously give light sentences to criminals, especially for cultural crimes of cultural property. If the sentences were stronger, they'd have less incentive to steal them. I mean, 18 months, 26 months, it's nothing. The real criminals do that with their eyes closed. So the authors have appeared to have stolen this painting, and their motive appears to have wanted it for their personal collection. This is a part that I find really interesting when looking at these cases that doesn't always make it into like the movies and the documentaries, is what they have to deal with when they have to restore it, because it always gets damaged when it's stolen. So the museum curators found it to be an incredible amount of damage. The painting was badly damaged. The damages were complex. Besides cutting it, he rolled it, and that caused the cracks you see. The damage was apparent to the eye, but with lighting and magnification, you could see it even worse. They had a lot to deal with. This is the original stretcher bars. You can see he used the nails. There's a little bit of the edges left. They had to marry this to that. This is the one he stretched. You can see the staples. So now they got all these little holes in it they have to deal with. And so he also brilliantly, he's supposed to be a genius, but he put a varnish on it, and he tried to fix the damage he caused by painting on it with paint. So they had to deal with all of this. The Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles accepted it as a project, and it was transported to California, where they did an amazing job marrying what was left behind at the crime scene with what they recovered. You can see here's again what Jerry did, and here's you can't see it, but there's the frame and the stretcher bars, and you see edges, but when they took it off, you can see it better here. They had to put this in there and marry it, and they did a really amazing job. After 3 years at the Getty Conservation Institute labs, it was returned to a state of structural integrity and returned to the museum. So again, they had a house full of items. They left $1 million in accounts. They had stolen de Kooning worth $160 million in their bedroom. But they did have a house full of souvenirs from their travels and a lot of Navajo blankets, as you can see in this photo. He really liked them. And they also had this Remington. So the executor, again, didn't know any of this. He didn't know what he was handling. It's actually worth a good sum of money. The executor of the state donated the Remington to a local nonprofit org called Town and Country Garden Club. He hoped they'd make a little money on these things. Hey, these are my uncles, I love them, maybe you can make money, it'll help you. Along with a load of other items, including 2 paintings by the Taos School in New Mexico by artists named Victor Higgins and Joseph Henry Sharp. The nonprofit sold them at auction in Scottsdale, Arizona, at the Scottsdale Art Auction. Here is the Victor Higgins painting. It's titled Aspens. Oil on Canvas. It's sold at auction for $93,600. Thanks to be a school teacher. Here's Joseph Henry Sharp. Oil on Canvas. No, he titled it Oklahoma Cheyenne. Oil on Canvas sold for $52,650. Turns out the 2 paintings were stolen on March 28, 1985, in broad daylight from the Harwood Museum of Art in Taos, New Mexico, seen here, ripped from the wall and carried out by a male suspect while his accomplice, a woman, distracted the guard, stolen in the same manner as the de Kooning. The museum curator, David Witt, had been attending a seminar on museum security at the time of this theft occurred. These works were returned to the museum in 2025 by the FBI. It took them time to find them through the buyer, and it took them time to get them to give it back, but they had to give them back. So the auction defended itself right away by saying they checked the paintings against in the National Stolen Art File of the FBI, there are numerous art files, like they have a really good stolen art database. You have Art Loss Register, the Carabinieri in Italy have a really good database. There's a very large database Interpol keeps, so you can, if something gets stolen, you can enter it, and then other people can check if it's there. But just because, if you're a dealer or an auction house, just because you check the database doesn't mean that that's not stolen. That doesn't complete the responsibility of due diligence search. It may be that what you're inquiring about wasn't entered into that database, but obviously they didn't do anything while they checked the database. They did a little due diligence. But that's just one of the databases are good, but it's not an end all, you know. And just when you think they could run out of stolen art capers, the Amarine Museum in Dragoon, Arizona, had a Chiefs blanket stolen that was worth $1 million on August 27, 1989. The perps used the same MO. Woman distracts, man steals. This is the blanket. It's on a advertisement that tells you they're offering a reward. Remember, he liked blankets. These blankets in this photo all ended up at Manzanita Ridge. That one that was stolen, no one knows where it is. They had no trace of it. And obviously we don't know if they did it, but the obvious is the obvious. These two were real thrill seekers who would go above and beyond to fulfill the psychological need of finding thrills and adventures. When they traveled, they were willing to enter areas that were dangerous and even off limits. They're the types that would go to South Korea and pay someone to clandestinely bring them into North Korea to take photos. He really wanted photos, he wanted to keep his journals. They were after these adventures. They once went to the Amazon to observe native tribes ceremoniously fight, but some, according to them, were killed in this. And he wrote about it in his book as well, in the chapter, The Arrows of Fortune. Two groups from different tribes squared off, and some got killed, and they recounted it to their friends gleefully, like they were attending a Broadway show. And he ran around photographing the event. They went to many museums and photographed multiple works, and it is suspected that they were casing the museums, a sophisticated manner of window shopping. So obviously their money came from somewhere. There were other thefts in the area and around their region that fit the same MO, just like that cheese blanket from Arizona. But no one can be sure they stole anything, but it certainly smells like them. But there are numerous interesting stories of art theft, forgery, art world money laundering, organized crime, murder mysteries, to name 5 of many. If it is an interest and people are willing to attend, I will discuss these subjects in future lectures. The next lecture I want to do is on the art scenes of Naples in Italy. It'll be this spring, and it's mixed with Camorra involvement. Camorra is the organized crime group in Naples that control Naples, and they do some things with antiquities, and there have been some art thefts, but it's not their biggest thing. So in cultural property protection realm, I consider myself now an art world investigative journalist. I am first and foremost an artist, and my life is dedicated to making art. I showed at the Y Gallery in the Lower East Side for a long time, but it was one of the best galleries in the neighborhood, but unfortunately it closed. All good things come to an end, especially in the art world. I'm currently homeless and looking for a dealer in a gallery. But my artistic voice has largely been what I call visual investigations into art theft and art crimes. And I have tried to approach my personal artistic investigations as an artist and a writer as a creative, which is unique because other people haven't tried this, like other art loss adjusters or lawyers or the people involved in this. I have made it a point to meet, befriend, and paint portraits of some of the most famous people in the cultural property protection realm, like my dear friend Fabrizio. There is no one more dedicated than some of the men and women whose portraits I have painted, like Fabrizio Paroli. He's a general in the Italian Carabinieri, Tutela Patrimonio Culturale, which is over 200 agents. He was the commander of that. Now he's moved on. He's a general. They have over 200 agents that do art crimes and art theft, antiquities, cultural property. His deep love of Italian culture and ecology, which are one and the same, they protect both, is unsurpassable and sincere. And here's Dick Ellis, And Dick was the founder of Scotland Yard's art theft unit and was very sophisticated and dedicated to the mission. He was in charge. He's the man who sent Charlie Hill to be undercover. You know, he started the unit in '69, so he's been retired a long time. I did this too. This is former cultural minister Giannato San Giuliano, former in Italy. I really like him. He's a very friendly guy. I also met and painted portraits of notorious art thieves, forgers, and underworld figures, including big fish mafiosi and Colombian cartel. Some of the biggest. I have had very in-depth conversations with these people and have absorbed a lot, and I have painted their portraits, and I make myself available. My friends do me favors, such as insurance art loss adjusters and others from Europe who need me to do questioning and follow-ups in New York. And they appreciated my help because I was loyal and never brag about my contributions to their cases, but it was funny when I was younger. My superiors didn't support my enthusiasms for art crimes, as Jimmy can attest to. He's another captain from the department. Our jurisdiction didn't have those investigations to contend with, but they did, however, send me to Scotland Yard for their art and antiques course back in 2004. But my interest in this just appeared very absurd to them. Many of these stories from my travels as an artist and an investigative journalist point of view are real treasures, and some are funny, and I might make good lectures if people are interested. So art theft's a major crime. This is Vermeer from the Gardner. I did do a lecture here on the Gardner already. Art theft's a major crime in the world. 90% of the stolen items never get recovered. This has always been a major problem in Europe, but USA also has had a lot of art thefts, and some very high-profile art thefts like this. 1990, 2 cops show up at the door after closing hours, ring the buzzer. The guard lets them in thinking they're cops. They lock him and the only 2 guards. They lock him up in the place. They lock him up to the pipes. They stole over $500 million worth of work, including 3 Rembrandts and this Vermeer's concert, which is worth $200 million. Nothing was recovered. This case is an interesting one. These are some museum thefts I'm going to show you right quick. The Madonna with the yarn winder, a Da Vinci, was stolen in 2003 from the Drumline Rig Castle in Scotland. It was stolen by 2 criminals during daylight hours who overpowered their tour guide and fled with the painting in a Volkswagen Golf. It was recovered. One of my friends was the brains behind recovering this. He was an art loss adjuster in London. This is Benvenuto Cellini's Saliera, which is beautiful, a gold piece, one of his beautiful gold piece works. I love Cellini. That was stolen in 2003 in Vienna. During closing hours, there was a scaffolding against the wall, and a man who actually had a business installing alarms and was probably good at also bypassing alarms, but he didn't have to. He scaled, he saw the opportunity, there was something worth value. He scaled the scaffolding, went in the window, he set off the alarm, went in the case, grabbed it. He was out and gone before the guard could get up the stairs to see what was going on, where the alarm went off. And this did get recovered. They were afraid it would get melted down because it's gold. He would never be able to sell that easily. You know, you'd have to have really good contacts and underworld contacts, and it gets dangerous too dealing with those people. So they thought it would get melted down, but they did get it back, and it's also fragile, but it wasn't damaged. This is an interesting one that'll be in the lecture about Napoli and the Camorra, so I get more into the really interesting details. But this is Octodorum, a really good burglar in Amsterdam. He scaled the ladder at the Van Gogh Museum, a great museum in Amsterdam. Him and his partner put a ladder to the window, climb up, get in the window real quick. They stole these 2 paintings. This is seen with the Italian Carabinieri after they recovered it in Naples. This view of the Sea of Scheveningen and congregation leaving the Reformed Church and doing it. And these are very important paintings of his earlier works. That was where Van Gogh's father actually was a minister. So, you know, he was a good burglar. He pulled off a great job, but going down the ladder, he fell. And he had to flee, and his ball cap fell off, and they had his DNA in the cap. So right away, he's in the database. He's a known burglar. He's been in their system. They pull him in. He's under arrest, and they tell him, this is Dutch national treasure. This is our cultural treasure. It's Van Gogh. You know, get us the paintings back. We'll help you with your sentence. He refused. He'd rather go to prison. Even if they gave him life, he was going to prison. He wasn't going to talk. They couldn't figure out why. They ended up finding these paintings in the walls of a mother of a boss, the Napolitan Camorrista boss. The Camorra, again, is the mafia that controls Napoli and its region. This boss, named Raffaele Imperiale, hid them in the walls of his mother's house. He got arrested in Dubai, the boss, and extradited back to Italy after they found this. But that was on a major cocaine trafficking charge and investigation. He probably bought these paintings with that in mind, for this kind of occasion in mind, that I can use that as a get out of jail free card, but it was too late because they had already had the paintings. So he didn't get to barter with those, at least. So here's the Louvre, another one. Here's a truck. They drove up with a truck, these thieves, and the ladder, automatic ladder right to the window. So those were a few examples of museum thefts that occurred. Some at night when the museum was closed, but mostly daylight hours are in their plans because they can infiltrate the security perimeter. Nighttime is hard. Again, 50% of art thefts from museums occur during opening hours. Like what Brett Weiser did with his girlfriend. They waltz in, they get past the museum security, and they're inside mingling with the people. Most museums, like the Met, have very sophisticated security systems, so burglaries are difficult. Nighttime burglaries are really difficult. The recent Louvre heist is the prime example. They went in daytime hours. They were dressed as construction workers. They drive up, put the ladder. At first, people thought they were working on the building. They got in the window while all the people were in there and everyone was working on it, and they took these crown jewels of France. And they did make 7 arrests because these dummies left DNA all over the place. They went down that ladder, got on little scooters and drove away. It was the most absurd thing, but they got away. None of this got recovered. They won't get this back because that could be taken apart and sold. And this is very important patrimony of France. So the director of the Louvre ended up eventually, actually this February, she resigned. It was a great embarrassment to the country of France and the Louvre. Unfortunately, armed robbery is also one of their options that has occurred. These high-profile art heists are less frequent, and high-priced, well-known art is harder to move again. So most art that is stolen is usually worth about $10,000 or $15,000. Lesser-known artists, they can usually move it and make something, especially if they take it across borders. Most of the thefts that occur in Europe are residences and churches, not so much museums that are much harder. But we're talking also about what the FBI does. They do everything. They do paintings, sculptures, antique sports memorabilia, watches, high-end watches, expensive watches are real high items here and in Europe. People steal watches often. The galleries get targeted as well. This one is titled Orientalist. It was stolen in New York years ago, never recovered. Guys waltz into the gallery and run out with it. And I show this often because I have a personal interest in this one. The last image I'll show you, the last painting, this is Raffaello di Giovanni Santi. This is Raffaello, stolen by the Nazis and still believed to exist after all these years. It's probably the most sought-after Nazi-looted painting in history. I'm showing you this with a reminder now that the Metropolitan Museum of New York, I'm very excited about this, has a Raphael show. It's opening up March 29th and it goes until June 28th. So they're going to show 170 masterpieces of Raphael right here. Some of my cousins were with us in the Vatican looking at the stanza of Raphael in the Vatican. It was awesome seeing Raphael. But so if you want, you get up to the Met, you see Raphael. It's gonna be big. You don't want to miss that blockbuster show. They used to have these blockbuster exhibits in the Met, and they stopped for a while. Like they had Artemisia, they had Da Vinci, Manet. Now they're having Raphael. That's big. So the story I recounted just now about the altars, recently featured in the Expedition Files show in the series Expedition File with Josh Gates. It's called Mysterious Endings, the episode, season 3, episode 7. I was honored to be a guest commentator in this episode. Try to see it. It's really well made, really well done. It loops constantly on Discovery Channel, Disney, and Hulu. Most people now, more people are interested in this than before. And many young people take a real interest in this now. It's a lot more popular now to know about cultural property protection and art theft and antiquity smuggling. There's places like Arca in Emilia, Italy that give classes. There's right here at Rutgers University, they have a cultural property protection and preservation master's degree. It's really interesting. Roma Tre in Italy, others have these master's programs. But just raising public awareness like this and discussing the works and showing them often is a good foundation in the fight against this. Especially all of us in the art world, we should be discussing it now and then. But I want to thank you for attending. I hope you found this to be a good yarn, and I hope you enjoyed it. In museum theft, the most important person is the frontline soldier, the security staff. And their job entails more than preventing theft. They have to worry about fire prevention. They have to worry if the roof leaks. They have to worry about first aid and for people that visit, dealing with the art public and the art lovers that come to the museum. They have so many responsibilities. And you don't want your museum to be a fortress. You want it to be a friendly area where people enjoy the environment, but you also have to protect the work. It's important to cooperate with them when you go there. They get annoying sometimes. Don't get too close. Don't have that bag. I see people get upset. But it's their job. Give them a break because what they're doing is so hard, and they have so much on their shoulders. One guard before the Gardner at BFA in Boston, one of the suspects, Miles Connor, stole with armed robbery a Rembrandt, right? And they actually shot the gun inside the museum when the guards were chasing them, and they shot at the steps. And one guard, he was an old retired cop, a Polish-American guy, old guy. He ran after him even after they shot the gun, and he ran up to the van and he grabbed him by the leg and he wouldn't let go. And they were pointing the gun at him and he wasn't letting go. You were not getting away with this Rembrandt, and they hit him with the gun. Boom. And they busted his head, but he ended up being a hero for trying, But that's not their job. They're not supposed to actually put their hands on people, but the police and the cop and them came out. But the USA has some really good museums with really good security. So in Europe, I like to go in and look. It was interesting to go into the VC because that was like going into an airport. We had to go through metal. It was so strange, the level of that security. Once you got in, there was 1,000 people in front of a Botticelli, and anyone could have cut it. You have to deal with vandalism. You have to deal with all different things. And how are you going to do it if you can't get to it because it was so crowded? It was like Mick Jagger was up there, But art theft does happen in the world, but other crimes are more frequent. The scope is vast, and you do have vandalism. You have money laundering, fraud, forgery. The realm of cultural property is huge. It gets very sophisticated at the international level and at the level of the ministries of the nation, the cultural ministries. So again, if these subjects are of an interest, I'll discuss them in some future lectures if you want. But I want to thank you for coming. I really appreciate being here. Try to make it to the next one, please. I'd like to see you. Couple of questions before you go have your wine.
Charlie, was anything ever turn up from the Gardner Museum?
I do believe maybe 2 or 3 might.
Really? Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
My goal in life, because I want to get more into the higher level of cultural property protection, really. These people that chase recoveries, they have to always wheel and deal, and they get in trouble because they have to. You're not supposed to take money from the criminal or give money to the criminal and take the piece, but how else are you getting it back? But with the Vermeer, that would be, like Dick Ellis calls it, the holy grail of stolen art. And he's in retirement, he's older, but he'll come out for that. Anyone will come out for the Vermeer, it would be nice for your great-great-grandkids to say, my great-great-grandfather helped get back that Vermeer, look at it, But I think that there might be hope for 1 or 2. It's been many years, but usually it takes 30 or 40 years for things to show up. Yes?
Was there ever any effort made from a civil standpoint to attach the proceeds of the estate of those two, for the expenses incurred by the museum or the FBI or the restorers? I mean, they were sitting on a piece of property, $1 million in cash.
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I don't think so, because like I said, I wouldn't think so. It doesn't seem that way because they could never prove they did it. And remember the element of the crime of possession knowingly. You can't even prove they did it or knew they
But
possessed
this would
it.
be a civil standard, not a criminal standard.
But, well, that's true. But I know that, so their son and daughter, supposedly, Ron Goldman was a really capable guy. That's why they chose him to be the executor. And Rita's biggest concern was she was getting really bad Alzheimer's, but she still knew to say, you have to make sure my kids are okay, because they weren't really capable of taking care of themselves. They had issues. They just couldn't survive. So she wanted to know that what was left behind would keep them safe and secure the rest of their life. So that's really, Ron Goldman did that for her kids. But as far as, and I know the FBI came in to help assist, but they didn't have much interest after the fact, especially after the case was closed, other than they would come back and try to recover it. It got recovered. When the 2 towel paintings, it took them time, but the FBI went and eventually got those back. But it's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. But I have not heard anything, and I know a lot about this case.
Well, I'm sure the estate has been distributed long time ago, to whomever.
Yeah.
But, they had it. That's the knowingly.
I don't think the Getty charged the museum for they accepted that as a project. I think the Getty did their work for free with the restoration. Anybody else?
What about that most recent jewelry heist?
That was it. I showed you.
That was the one?
Yeah. Running away, they were really good, but they were also bumbling. They all got caught, so they weren't that good. But they left behind a lot of DNA. They even found the scooters. They had DNA on everything, but they actually dropped one of the crowns that had like hundreds of diamonds in it.
Yeah, I didn't hear the end of it. That's why I was asking.
But so they got the one back they dropped, but the rest of that work I showed you, the jewels,
They never got it back.
No, they're not going to get that back. One of them was an Algerian national, and some they caught trying to leave the country. They were watching them really close. They were on them right away. Museum did a lousy job. The police did a great job getting their suspects, but they didn't get anything back, because that is not art. Like, that's in art museum, but that's easy. Bust up, sell
They take it up
stones.
and just sell the gems.
Yeah. There's always a problem, though, and France has really heavy-hitting organized crime. Like, going back to, if you remember the movie The French Connection, heroin used to be moved by the Corsicans. And they have Marseille, which is a pretty tough city. And the Corsicans used to be the tough guys in the city, where now it's more North Africans, but they still have this element of organized crime. When you have to go to them for either the fence or move jewels or say restoration, if you steal a painting and you have to restore it, my friend Bobby Volpe was like my mentor in the NYPD. He used to do NYPD investigations for 10 years. And I hear a dog barking. It's got to be someone who was born on the same day as de Kooning. So Bobby told me with the Gardner heist, because they cut 2 Rembrandts from the frames brutally, from the stretcher bars, and he said if they go to a restorer, that restorer is going to think, I'll restore these and they're going to kill me. How do I know they're going to let me live? Because now you just brought another person into it that knows who you are. It's always tricky. Fencing, but you have, so this is what in Europe, when they have a more sophisticated art thief, and they know who's a real art thief and who is an amateur, and the real art thief kind of knows how to move it. Like Durham already had a buyer for those Van Goghs. He was a very big organized crime figure in the drug trade in Amsterdam. But that man, after the theft, but before they could sell it, it was a mob-led hit. He got killed in the Netherlands. So then they were at a loss. But see, Imperiale also had operations in Amsterdam and moved around with them, and they moved right to him, and he bought them. You know, so it's really gets pretty interesting and international. You know. Anybody else? Yeah.
Will you come back one day and tell us about the underground art mafia? Is there like a lot out there?
But there really isn't an underground art mafia.
Well, like
The organized crime, for the most part, isn't interested in this because it's not. Except, I mean, you could say with the antiquity smuggling in Italy, they're a little more. My cousin Francis can attest to this. They're a little more loose with the term. Like here, it's like they're not the mafia, but there they'll say there's a fish market mafia, there's a fruit market mafia, there's a market there's a mafia at the school crossing guards, right? They don't have school crossing, but I'm saying. So when these this I like to talk about in future lectures because the Cerveteri I'd like to talk about and the Etruscan and the Tombaroli that the tomb robbers, they used to poke these poles down and find the tomb because you could kind of see a little hill. There's thousands of tombs that still haven't been opened in Lazio, and so then who was moving it? There was a whole network. So it becomes organized crime if you have a boss and you have a whole network, you know. And one of the guys where they blew the lid off of it, he came from Casal de Principe, which is very interesting, and that is a Camorra town. It's a town that's completely walled. Everyone has 10 feet walls around their houses. It's really strange to see. Well, thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.